sometimes we can get consumed with the requirements of the business. And, you do what's needed for the kids and the wife, but somehow you find yourself just exhausted. And I guess for those that are really strongly faith-based, to make sure God endorses what it is you're spending your time on.
Welcome to The Climb, where I help Christian men live fully, lead boldly, and leave a legacy that matters. I'm your host, Teko Bailey, husband, father, life coach, and your guide in the climb. Whether you're navigating fatherhood, building a business, or simply longing to live more purpose, this is a space to rise. Well, Ralph, thank you so much for joining The Climb. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you and your audience.
Thank you. You've done quite a bit in different areas and spheres around the world as a global strategist, a CEO of companies as well as humanitarian organizations. Talk to me a little bit about what inspired you to occupy those spaces and just the leadership roles and spheres that you've served in.
Yes. Well, I'm now involved in both international business and international ministry, but one of the defining moment intersections in my younger life when I was, I guess by that point, mid-20s, after I had worked on both an MBA and a Master of Divinity, was making the assumption that I had to choose one or the other. And in that particular context, I had been director of a telecommunications center that served World Vision, that at the time was doing a lot of television revenue producing with different shows and such. And I had a bachelor's degree in communication. So based on those 2 points of experience, I was offered a position with American Express in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, at a much higher salary, as you can imagine. And I really needed to pray through that. And again, I couldn't have done both jobs, but I didn't see the convergence of the two until later in my experience. So it was during the post-Vietnam era when there was a lot of Indochina refugees getting out of Vietnam and going all over the place and being harassed and raped and stolen from on their boats leaving this country. And I was offered then a position with World Vision India to move from the U.S. role that I had in the fundraising area to being an associate director in Taipei, Taiwan, which was at the time the location where they were handling more of the Indochina activities. That intersection was an important decision, but not having just made that decision, which involved prayer and discussion with my wife and one child and one on the way at the time, mid-20s, as we were preparing to move to Taipei, noticed that our daughter, who was then 2, my firstborn, born on my birthday, she was very vivacious, a blonde kid, and we call her the preacher because she was so bubbly. But we noticed with all of we had garage sales and putting stuff in storage, and some of our stuff was going to be shipped, and we had a lot of training conferences to go to and preparations. We noticed that she stopped walking across the room, but she'd start to hang on to the furniture and walk around the room, touch the couch or the chair. So since we're going out of our medical network, we decided to have her tested. I'll condense a very long story into a short one, but the final of maybe 5 or 6 visits, the pediatric neurologist indicated in his honest but not quite best bedside manner that your daughter has about a year to live, and she's not going to. It wouldn't be in her best interest for you to go on this international assignment. So,
wow,
it was one of many adjustments in our defining moments of many over the years.
Major adjustment, I would add.
Yes. So I stayed in the international division. I stayed at World Vision 10 years, and I was in the corporate gifts and working with major donors, and it became a valuable training period for me, mid-20s to mid-30s. But I traveled extensively, which began to develop the global contacts and relationships. And of course, you meet business people, you meet all kinds of people, and that contributed to the journey. So you probably have another question, but that's one defining moment that took a lot of intention to make a decision, and then once that decision was made, it was adjusted outside of our choosing.
Your PhD in intercultural formation. Tell me a little bit about that and what inspired it.
Well, as I traveled by that time throughout many countries, I became familiar with the role of the church, the role of the ecclesia in different contexts. Some in cultures where Christianity was accepted, some where it was persecuted.
Yeah,
And it was a very clear experiential understanding that I had. And of course, it continued into decades beyond that. But cultures that are based in shame and revenge versus those that are based in mercy and compassion are quite different. And you can see that in the present context, I think, with some of the Islamic jihadis now and you know, the way women and children are treated and so forth. So
yeah.
the actual dissertation title was The Role of Mercy Ministry in the Growth and Health of the Church. In each case, without question, the churches that were involved in compassion ministry that, you know, preached the word, but also helped feed and provide medical assistance and job training, et cetera,
Yes.
by far blessed the local communities and regions they were in than those that didn't.
It takes a lot of or a different kind of vision for a person's life to lean towards the direction of work that you've chosen. Where did this begin? Who inspired the Ralph that we see today? And what were some of the steps you took to get there? I can also assume that you experienced different setbacks along the journey. And for the guy who is listening and maybe has a similar interest, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, one of the discoveries I learned I guess the necessary way. I was going to say the hard way, but it was the necessary way is that we hear testimonies of accomplished and wonderful Christian people, you know, on different platforms, and many of them. I don't have any empirical way of determining what percentage, but many people go through a really rough 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. You know, drugs,
Yeah.
alcohol, everything. You know, just total. And God got a hold of them, and the rest of their life has moved in a direction. And I guess the experience I had was that I had relatively had my life in some order and submission to the Lord, but there were other places that caused me to wander or to move off of that path that
Yes.
didn't happen in my 20s. It happened
Yeah.
in my 40s, and there's a story that goes behind that. But back to one part of your earlier question. In doing a lot of medical mission, I therefore developed a lot of medical product sources. And so later in my journey, I began to do contract pharmaceutical manufacturing I set up an LLC, a Global Med Partners, and we did a variety of things to help bring affordable products without the markups and some of the nonsense that medical device manufacturers and pharmaceutical manufacturers are involved in. You know,
Yes.
profit is the key, but in my case,
Yes.
just cover the cost, make a small stipend, and try to get the products to. And to answer the other part of your question, then, so in traveling with many wonderful saints of God to remote places, doing medical and other work, but in sticking with this story in the medical context, those were the heroes. Those were the heroes. Those were the people that inspired me to continue on that journey. And I'll tell you one story. It it happens to be in my fourth book. I just published my seventh book a few months ago. But All Who Wander,
Yes.
rediscover God's purpose on your journey. This story that I'm about to tell you is in there, and that is that I met a Chinese pastor called. His English name was George Chen. Chen Minyan, of course, is his Chinese name, but he picks George so we could talk to him.
Make it easier.
Yeah, and he had been the son of a capitalist industrialist, and right around the time of Mao's or subsequent years after Mao, and he had become a very strong underground church pastor, and he was eventually put in a re-education camp in Sichuan province where 40,000 individuals were re-educated. And his story, he's deceased now, but his story involved him telling about his prayer garden. And his prayer garden in this camp, a re-education camp, was to go into this large culvert and wade into human waste up to his chest
Wow.
with a shovel, and his job was to empty it every day. he he described that as his prayer garden because of the smell and the
Mm-hmm.
nature of it. The cadres never came near him. His other colleagues were, blaring music and a lot of harassment. He was alone, and he was alone to pray. And he
Wow.
and so, I mean, it's hard
talk
to.
talk
That's
about talk about a blessing in disguise.
Yes, that's in chapter one. But so I traveled with him all over China. I've been to China now maybe 50 plus times, mostly to some of the ethnic minorities in the south, Yunnan, Guangxi province along the Vietnam, Laos, Burma, border. There were times when, and I was still young then, but they took two long poles and strapped a little, a Target or Walmart lawn chair and put it on ropes and stuck me in it and carried four guys to carry me on their shoulders and walk up 10,000, walk up
Wow.
switchback 10,000 feet. And we would get up to the top and, I would preach in English and George would translate to Chinese and then somebody else would translate it to meow or lisu or something. It was just,
Yes.
and it was those experiences. I'm just telling you one story out of hundreds.
Yes. Yes.
When I saw the way God used people to go to remote places, and of course we provided medical supplies, we built, we provided hymnals and all kinds of things. That's a tangible story for a lifetime.
Yes. Today, you consult with leaders on transformative change and different ways of developing their country and the communities that they lived in. I find, or it seems to me, that you really have a heart to see transformation take place in its different forms and in the different places that you go to. What is your outlook on that today as you look
Yes.
where we are as a world, as a people group?
Yes.
You know, the world is shrinking, as I would say right now. But what is your outlook, having been where you've been and observed some of the things that you've seen? How do you advise leaders now as we approach life today?
Well, one clear maturation process for me, all of the 2 point something billion dollars worth of product and dollars that I was able to distribute in many different places all had human value: food, medicine, materials, clothing, et cetera, et cetera. But what I'm very passionate about, and it became more enlivened over the years, was that we who had training, experience, and spiritual discernment to do so needed to help people become self-sufficient and sustainable in their own right, and not
Mm-hmm.
to build supply lines of dependence of any kind. So I um, extolled the term, which I didn't create myself, the term redemptive entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And that takes many forms, and for a period of time when I was in Skid Row, Los Angeles, I taught at USC Marshall School of Business in social entrepreneurship. Different terminology, different audience,
Yes.
secular audience. But
Yes.
redemptive entrepreneurship intends to take a community or individuals that have come out of trafficking or oppressive situations, or just grew up in a context that didn't have opportunity, not even necessarily being unduly oppressed,
Yes.
and helping them learn skills that can take local products and resources and turn it into income generating opportunities. And those things took many different forms. One example was providing a $50 loom, raw materials, and training to Tibetan women who created their traditional carpets.
Yeah.
Not the kind that will fill an entire room, but smaller ones that we developed an export process and sold those in Western markets. Helping someone in Honduras set up a taco vendor, roadside stand, and uh, urban laundry. There's just different ways of doing that. I don't want to go too far into the detail.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be a latter 20-25 years of my journey where I really try to invest time in training, helping, encouraging. I
Yes.
don't claim to be a fountain of wisdom, but I do have experience in encouraging leaders, indigenous or otherwise, to include that or emphasize that in the work that they do, especially in the context of the church. You have Grameen Bank, and you have all kinds of secular microloan projects that don't have any faith based to it. But I'm back to my doctoral dissertation. When people of faith use compassion and redemptive entrepreneurship in the work that they do, it blesses the body, the soul, and the spirit.
I absolutely agree. And it's such a good way to have a different worldview on how we help to build our cultures and societies.
Yes.
I'm gonna jump a little bit into your book, All Who Wander, because bumping into you in San Jose earlier this year, I couldn't tell from first impression that, and like most people, we wouldn't know their journey or story. And I find you've definitely had an interesting journey becoming the person you are today. Excited to how should I put this? Or let me rephrase that. It's really good meeting people like you who have been through the seasons that you've been through, the setbacks that you have, but still pushed forth into the things that the Lord deeply placed on your heart.
Yes.
In the book, All Who Wonder, you talk about how will you respond when it happens?
Yes.
And it is such a, my gosh, it can mean anything. You've been through some very major setbacks in your life and
Yeah.
you really pushed through. Talk to us a little bit about that. To the guy who is listening and he's going through his own it,
Yeah.
feeling stuck, feeling overwhelmed, and not necessarily sure if he has the strength to move forward. Take us back into a little bit of that journey and
Yeah.
how you pushed through and overcame some of it.
Well, there's a few examples, but I'll use one that has the most, I guess, impact. So I traveled all over the world, and I can't speak for traveling women, but for traveling men, there's often temptation to get involved sexually with someone, and I can say thankfully that in all those years of travel, I didn't do that one time or any time.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I did it 55 times. No, I, I didn't do it at all. Yeah. Yeah. So, but in the vortex of my daughter who ended up dying at age 10, and my traveling and my wife's pain, her response was during my absence was to reach out to a friend, which then turned into something sexual. And I'm going to shorten a long story and counseling,
Yeah.
but it turned into a divorce situation. Um, then subsequent to that, I determined that I wanted to raise my kids, and then divorce situations always end up in pain for everyone, the kids, the parents, the grandparents. So
And you had three kids in total, right?
yes.
Yeah.
So that threw me off. I did okay for a while, but post divorce, it was kind of a feeling sorry for myself kind of period of time. And there were times when I felt isolated. At times when I doubted my faith. There were times
Yeah.
when I felt, I guess, just shame for not doing everything properly, or not knowing, or not being able to do, where there was all kinds of feelings.
Yeah.
At the lowest point is you humorously ended up being at one of the highest points. I was on the 108th floor of the Eiffel Tower at midnight, walking around. Anyone that's been to the Eiffel Tower, you can walk around, look at the city lights. I had been divorced for whatever years, 6, 5, 4, I can't remember, 5, maybe 5 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I only stayed at World Vision for 10 years. And anyway, I was past what I call for a US listener, W2, time of my life. That's a tax, you get your W2 tax statement.
That's right.
My paycheck, minus taxes, whatever.
Yes.
I was past that period. And I was looking at lots of passion, lots of experience, a daughter who died, a wife who had committed adultery, and I was not working at the time in a W-2 single paycheck,
Yeah.
So it was a time of, okay, Ralph, are you going to kind of lick your wounds and go crawl off to someplace, or are you going to pull
Yeah.
it? And I don't want to suggest that I did it all of my own. The thing that I wanted to tell anyone who's listening is that God never leaves us, never, even when we don't know that he's there. And that a lesson I learned was that we should never give up. Never. He never leaves.
Yes.
He never
Yeah.
leaves us, and we should never give up. And I would, that this part of the story I'm telling you is still 20 years ago, and I've had just a couple of more whacks on the side of the heads since then, and my lesson is still the same. God never and God never leaves us, and even when we don't feel it. Yeah, there was a period of time where I had accumulated so many. Well, let me back up. There was a church I attended when I was divorced, and it was a men's group, and they had like this 12 chapter men's training thing and men's issues.
Yeah.
And I was, Mister. I had degrees and experience and a global traveler. And said, I had my own business. And for like 10 chapters, I was thinking I could teach this class,
Yeah.
but there were two, there were 2 chapters that had slight modifications of title that both had to do with forgiveness.
Yes.
And I realized I was carrying a lot of crap.
Mm.
I had a list of like 20. So they had, I don't want to tell the whole sequence, but you had to identify who those were, and then you had to go through a process. And I had like 20 people on the list, and I thought,
Yeah.
yeah, no wonder God is still trying to get my attention, because I can't carry all this. This guy did this and this guy did that. I can't do that. And again, the the learning process, the redemptive process that God uses in us never ends until we take
Yes.
the last breath, until we go into eternity. So for those people that have their own death of a loved one, divorce, cancer, the kids screwed up, whatever, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it is, God is there, and He loves you, and I'll never leave you nor forsake you, He said.
Yeah.
And that's what got me through the darkest times, even on the 8th floor of the Eiffel Tower.
Wow. Wow. So the book itself is titled All Who Wonder, but I guess there's one section you mentioned, if I'm phrasing it correctly, all who wonder are not lost.
Yes.
Am I saying that correct?
Yes.
And I feel like at different seasons in our lives, especially if we're very far from understanding what our purpose is, many of us feel that way, that we're just wandering. We're just here on earth wandering.
Yes.
Help me understand, or how does one get closer in that phase or season of wandering? Um, what steps can we take to get closer to what it is that God really wants us to do or have created us for? Whether it's a wandering through just finding your way in life, or a wandering because we have had such a major setback or it happened to us.
Yes. And it could be just never feeling like you can get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah,
Something major, divorce, your wife didn't sleep with somebody, your kid didn't die, you don't have cancer.
yeah,
You're just
yeah,
on a hamster wheel, and it's like, what? I mean, what? This is, where am I going? This is like,
yeah,
so that could be the it. But the answer, not the answer, the journey that I discovered, which answers your question, is you need to step off the hamster wheel with intentionality and spend some time alone. And it should be in my case, and it doesn't apply to everyone that has to do it this way, but once or twice a year, I would take 2 or 3 nights, and I went to a retreat center run by a group of monks in the desert here in Southern California. That doesn't apply. There may not be such an institution in wherever someone's listening, but the point is to turn turn off your phone. In this case, they don't have internet, which is perfect because you can't
really good.
you can't use it anyway. And just for me, being in nature. So the monks have their little, every morning they do this, and noon the bell rings and they do all their thing. I just kind of go there and I sit in my lawn chair on a mountaintop with the wind blowing, and I just talk to God, or I more effectively listen to God when I'm in those settings. So
Yes.
that's sort of the annual thing. But then, you know, the days can get busy. I guess intentionally trying to listen to God on I'd like to say daily, but it isn't doesn't that doesn't happen in my life.
Yeah.
Weekly probably, where I step outside of the noise, the literal or figurative noise in my routine, and say, Lord, I love you, and I want to hear you, and that helps to slow the craziness down for me. And then I've always been another tool. All Who Wander was partially made possible because I kept a travel journal, and I had 50 some journals when I took stories out. Some I don't have to have a journal because they're impressed in my spirit.
Yes.
So journaling, but I have, oh, it's in that file. I keep a journal when I travel, but I keep a journal when I'm here. And journaling, time alone in nature, and intentional time to make some recommitments and pray really deeply. Those would be three tools that I found very helpful and
Yeah.
I find you texted me before we got on this podcast, and I gave you some prayer requests. I just got whacked with some other. Yeah.
Yes.
But
No, a good.
if you know God never leaves you, even if you don't feel it at the time,
That's right.
I sometimes I say, okay, and I'm sort of yeah, sort of I talk to God very openly.
Yes.
I don't cuss at him, but I say, okay, what? What?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very,
Again,
yeah,
is this happening again?
yeah.
Well, David, King David from the Bible, I think he had a very robust conversation with the Lord. At
It's
least it seems that way in his writing. He was very open and very real with the Lord, and I think um, we can learn how to maybe do more of that because I think God is so resilient. He understands our flaws, where we're coming from, and where we need to get to.
Yes. I mean, I just this morning in my prayer time, which is usually three in the morning. I'm up early. I said something to the effect. I said, God, you made this lump of clay, and I'm sorry that I still doubt you and don't have, faith that can move mountains. But I'm your son, and you love me, and I love you. I mean, it's
Yes.
just honestly, I love to read, and a book that I've never mentioned to you, but it was written in the 1600s. It's just a teeny little book that was translated from the French. It's called Trustful Surrender to Divine Providence. And I think that's the secret sauce when we finally can say that we surrender to God
Yes.
totally.
Yes.
And 127-page book, but I thought these are so meaningful
Yes.
that they have been for me. So prosperity has the effect of softening us. Adversity, on the other hand, leads us naturally to raise our eyes to heaven to seek consolation in our distress. There is no tribulation or temptation where God has not appointed limits so as to serve not for our destruction, but for our salvation.
Wow.
Number three, these are not numbered, I'm just speaking. Apart from sin, nothing happens to us in life unless God wills it so. There's a big one.
Yes.
It's foolish to think we can see better than God, who is not subject to the passions that blind us, knows the future, and can foresee all events and consequences. And then two more. All is vanity, and nothing can satisfy my heart. The things that I so earnestly desire may not be at all the things that will bring me happiness. And I love this last one. It's just this. But by the way, this is in All Who Wanders. This is on page 164 of All Who Wanders. But anyway,
Yes.
whether the sea is calm or rough, whichever way the waves are carried by the wind, is a matter of indifference to him, for the place where he is firm and unshakable. So,
There's one thing go ahead.
my young friend, when you get old, you just kind of the school of hard knocks. I guess that's a colloquialism, but
It shapes you.
yeah, the school of hard knocks marinated in the sauce of God's word. And,
Yes.
this is not an original quote. A success is simply getting up one more time than you fall down.
Wow.
And we all fall down. And
That's right.
sometimes we feel guilty, or we feel ashamed, or we feel, and it's not like we don't actually do bad things. I mean, we have to repent, but
Yes.
God never leaves us.
That's right. That's right. There's one thing you mentioned from the book just now. All is vanity. I've heard the phrase in many places, in many contexts, and especially in the Bible. But I just wonder, is it that you get to a certain stage in life for that to become real when you've done everything and been everywhere and kind of have everything, and you realize what's the worth of all of these things, compared to when you don't have it and you're trying to make a name and you're trying to establish yourself. Because I find a lot of us have experienced success, but still lack meaning, still lacking purpose, still feeling empty.
Yes.
How would you help men to get through those stages when, you know, we have to lead, we have to provide, we have to succeed, we have to
Yes.
build things, we have to make names for ourselves. And yet, in the end, you also want to live a very purposeful life and leave a good legacy, not just financially, but in a holistic way that
Yes.
your children's children can benefit from, and not just a name you had that will be forgotten.
Yes. I suppose it comes in different decades for different people, but the best way I can respond to the question is to pray and to pray, to understand, to discern, and to realize that all of our successes in whatever areas you just described um, were gifts from God. And there's been times in my life where I sort of puffed up my chest metaphorically and thought, well, hey, I've got like 20, 5 years of formal education, and I've got two companies, and I used to be the president of a foundation and a blah, blah. And I have a 500-acre agribusiness in the Congo, and I have this and that and this and that. And when you let yourself go down that path too far, you're either going to fall on your face or God's going to smack you back to the starting point. If you can do all those things and remember that everything, our intellect, our personality, our circumstances come from God. Now we have to maximize. We have to be good stewards and don't bury the coin in the ground and all that good stuff. He gives us all different roles, and we don't have to be university professors at Oxford. I mean, so whatever you have, whatever I have, if we just are thankful, in all things give thanks. If we're just thankful to God and realize that even our success, and he tells us not to be lazy, and it's all the proverbs, all the good things that talk about work and outcomes. Tr- trustfully surrender to divine
Yeah.
providence. Trustfully surrender to divine providence. I mean, yeah, that's my
But how does one find a good balance, if there is such a thing, in the midst of
moving
growing and,
up the ladder.
moving up the ladder, leading your family, dealing with all of the demands that comes with the early years of whether starting a business or
Yes,
starting anything in life, for that matter of fact. I find even in my own life, it's either you are a little bit too much on this side and you need to, steer back on track, or you're a little bit to that side too much and you have to course correct. Is there a way, are there any suggestions that you'd give to help us to stay on course as we, go through the journey in the climb?
well, there's no way to circumvent the journey
Yeah.
or to avoid it. If I was going to go on a hike to Kilimanjaro, I didn't I
Yeah.
didn't do it. But there's, other than the helicopter, there's
Yeah.
if you're gonna go to the top of Kilimanjaro, you have to go on the journey. So that's maybe a humorous response. Yeah, you have to go through it. But I think one thing that's helpful, I think, is to have one or two. Mentor can be a overused word or an understood word, but one or two people that are on their way back. Someone told me one time, "You're still on your way, but I'm on my way back,"
Yeah.
which was kind of a cute way of saying, I
Been around that mountain.
trust me, I've been there. So having one or
Yeah.
two people in your life that have been there,
Yeah.
whether it's your particular business or ministry. And then of course a friend. I used to meet with a friend every year for a retreat. I guess that's not part of my twice a year prayer time at the monk's place, but once a year we would meet for 2-3 days and be accountable to each other.
Yes.
All kinds of things that happen when you're going through life. So you can't avoid the journey, and to have some people that you can age in and of itself doesn't put somebody in a category of presuming to be able to help you, but someone that you respect that can, one or
Yeah.
two, and one or two sojourners. Yeah. And yeah, all who wander are not lost, but like lost for eternity lost, but
Yeah.
all who wander will be lost for moments of time, hopefully
Small
chunks of
moment.
small chunks of weeks or months. I had a few years actually. So yeah, but just remember, God loves you, and He never leaves you. And don't give up. I've talked to people that wanted to commit suicide. I was a Navy chaplain 8 years, and
Yeah.
I picked up my dear friend that I used to go on annual retreats with. His son committed suicide, and I had to go with him to an apartment in Oceanside, California, and pick up his stuff. I mean,
Wow.
those are the kind of things that
Yeah.
you can't plan, and it just happens.
Yeah.
So he was one of the guys that was a fellow journeyman, and we had the unique and unfortunate circumstance of giving the eulogy at each other's kids' funeral. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you
That
can't
that
plan.
must.
You can't.
You can't.
It just
No, you
happens.
can't. You
Yeah.
can't. More into the maybe a little bit into the business side of life. And if you were to speak to a young man who is starting out in the business world, any advice for him with juggling his family and just, trying to keep on track with his own life? If you were to encourage him or to give him some nuggets, what might that be?
Well, besides the journaling, having the friendships and the journeyman, the prayer time, the annual stuff, as far as business, sometimes we can get consumed with the requirements of the business, and you do what's needed for the kids and the wife, but somehow you find yourself just exhausted. And I guess for those that are really strongly faith based, to make sure God endorses what it is you're spending your time on, and,
Yeah.
and it sounds like a platitude, taking time for yourself, being very concerned for your employees or your associates, and giving back always, whether it's time off or something intangible even.
Yes.
In the agribusiness we have in the Congo now, of course, we are providing a, a higher wage than the prevailing wage, which of course is nowhere near
Not
Western
much. Yeah.
Western countries, but we buy food and provide health care, and we have like 100 men in the field and maybe 20 women in the factory or the work area.
Yeah.
Try to treat your associates and employees and subordinates with respect, and um, consider their own struggles. Relationships are what really matter. I mean, we have to, and you use God honoring principles, in your business too, and
Yes.
a combination of things. It's a lot of it comes out of your own place of peace or settledness.
Yes.
If you're a firecracker and you lose your temper and you can't handle pressure, I mean, your life has to be centered with some reasonable framework so that you can do all the things you need to do. But yeah, it's you have 3 or 4 kids,
Yes.
and 1 or 2 jobs or 1 or 2 businesses. Yeah,
Well,
and just
I
just don't let Satan whisper in your ear, because you could feel sorry for yourself.
yeah,
I need it. I need it. I need to
yeah,
do whatever. Don't do whatever.
yeah.
Stay on the path. Yes.
No, I think it's good, just what you've said, in addition to just having the right people around you to help you stay anchored
Yes.
and grounded, because we do get in those moments where we feel, whether it's feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling like we are, above the standard of what is expected. And so we veer off from time to just do our own thing and justify it because, well, I've been doing this for X number of years, and you kind of build up a mind ideology that I can just do whatever I want at some point.
Yeah.
But as we look into just the family dynamics, the work dynamics, we've touched a bit of that. Is there any other key aspect of the journey within the climb that you'd like to speak to as it relates to the journey that men goes through, and just a word of encouragement there?
Yes. I was looking for one. Here it is. So my last book is called Awakened:
Yes.
Embracing Freedom in Times of Peril. By the way, if you just type my name in Google, you'll go to Amazon. If you type my name as Amazon, you'll get about 4 books out of 7. They're not all on there. But 3 things I'd like to share to answer your question. The level of enemy opposition is commensurate with his perception of the danger you pose to his earthly deception. dominion and destruction. Now, there's definitely a spiritual center to that statement. And if someone is still on a faith journey and doesn't understand that statement, I guess what it means is if you're not doing too much for the kingdom, the devil's not going to pay a whole lot of attention to you. He's going to kick your butt if you're.
Yes.
Yes, I'm happy. I get my butt kicked all the time, so that must be good.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
second thing is you cannot, and this has happened even last year, even this year, 2005. You cannot begin to embrace true humility, a necessary condition of the heart, without first having been refined by unexpected humiliation. There are times when someone does something abjectly unfair to you,
Yeah.
slanders you, you had nothing to do with it. It's humiliating. It's public, but it's part of God refining your character. And then,
So refining, yeah.
yeah. And the third thing I said in a different way. If at first you don't succeed, try again. In other words,
Yes.
don't, yeah. Two illustrations. So Robert the Bruce, King of Scotland, 1314 said that if you don't first succeed, try and try again. But probably the more important is Deuteronomy 24, which says, "For the Lord your God is He who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies, to give you the victory." Yeah, you don't ever believe that God has left you, and never give up. I mean, that perseverance is a spiritual and a physical. I mean, it's everything. If you want to be an athlete,
It shapes you.
yeah, perseverance.
That's right.
You have to persevere.
No, this is so good, Ralph. For people who want to get in touch with you or find you, what are some options to do that?
Yeah, I think the easiest is my website, drralphplumb.com. It's Dr. Ralph Plumb, RALPHPLUMB. No spaces, no periods.
Yes.
drralphplumb.com. Has a phone number, has a bunch of bunch of links and so forth.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. And your books would be found on, did you say Amazon?
Well, four of the seven are on Amazon, but if you go to the website, you'll get all of them. I mean,
Okay.
they'll all be there. It'll have have a screenshot, and it'll have a link and everything. So
Perfect.
probably website's the simplest. You can write to me, you can telephone me, you can look at the books or whatever. So yeah.
Excellent. And I think even as we're closing, just the amazing work that you've been doing in different parts of the world. It's just so good to have more people like you in our time with vision and strategy to help encourage the rest of us and lead us into the kind of world that we want to create. Thank you so much for joining me on The Climb. It's a pleasure having you here.
It was my blessing and privilege, Teko. Thank you so much.